protests on the streets of Los Angeles.
It was a peaceful rally. What is going on right now is also peaceful.
Here we are expecting rallies later on.
When they show up, we gotta show up even stronger.
In Los Angeles, there is a new crowd of protesters that has been building.
CNN had it that these were rallies. Now they've become protests. I'm afraid that by tonight they become riots. If we don't have the ability to stand up and stop this violence before it consumes a great city like Los Angeles, then there's no telling where this could spread.
All right, guys, good morning. I have to find myself. There I am. Something's going on with my cameras today, so I apologize. I've been having some technical issues. No surprise there. Good morning. Happy Thursday. I think it's Thursday. Happy Thursday. I'm Tabitha Hassell with Tabs on Tap. One day closer to Friday, right? Hope you guys are all having a really good morning. I've been having some technical issues this morning. I have no idea what's going on, but whenever I look at my camera, it's like a big blue line. And I had a hard time getting the camera to come up. And I kept thinking, can I do a show? And I just won't be on the camera. I'll just be talking. But like, well, that would be kind of weird. But I was able to fix it. Thankfully, I've been getting enough early start, which I'm surprised because I did oversleep this morning, but early enough. Good morning, Kim. Good morning, Dottie. Good morning, Linda. Good morning, Karen. I had one of those mornings. I was up late last night as usual. And I don't normally am awake long before my alarm goes off either way, but here lately I haven't been going to sleep, till 1, 2, or 3 a.m. So I always set an alarm for 6 a.m., 5:30, 6 a.m., something in that range. And this morning I just happened to wake up and it was 6:30 and I thought, oh my gosh, I better get up and get a move on things. We've all had those mornings. At first I was like in a complete panic attack. I'm like, is it 6 a.m., 6 p.m.? What time is it? Good morning, Rob. Good morning, Beatrice. Good to see you all this morning. Just another big day in the news. So much more to talk about. The growing escalation of threats coming out of the Middle East. We're weak right now with all this protesting going on. We are in a weakened state. And we're going to definitely be talking about that because I feel like the whole world right now is coming against us. Like they've had this planned for a long time to all join forces and go against us. And at least it feels that's what's happening right now. I wouldn't be surprised if we find out later that it was a plan. I wouldn't be surprised at all because there's some very powerful people who are losing out on some funding from the United States government, and they're none too happy about that. Good morning, Vernon, and good morning, Genevieve. Thank you for that, Vernon. You guys are all so nice to me. Good morning, Adrian. And it's crazy. Rioting, 1,500 cities and 50 states taking place this coming weekend. It's already taking place. I'm going to show a couple little clips from that. We're going to talk about the National Guard. We're going to talk a little bit about the Doge cuts, of course, making the news once again because it is passing its first round in the House. Did pass its first round in the House. We're going to talk a little bit about that, about No King's Day. So many different things to talk about today. And I really want to talk today about rioting that's going to take place across this country. Again, the people that's behind it, we're going to touch base on. We pretty much knew who all those folks are. And how does that coexist with what's happening in the Middle East and the threat that is currently against us? I think it's tied together. I really do. I know that may be far-fetched, but I think this is a staged coup. I've been saying it for the past couple of days. And people will say, well, Iran has nothing to do with the United States or these NGOs or these protesters, but that's not true. We talked about the connections with the Muslim Brotherhood and how the Muslim Brotherhood is a big funder. They're right behind the organization of a lot of these protests. All of these people in these groups have come together, not against just Donald Trump, but also against us Americans. And, how far are they going to take it? How far are they willing to go? I hear some crazy stuff out there on the back channels. I mean, there are some people who are very, very worried. So I usually think, okay, if these people are super, super worried, then we're going to fall somewhere kind of in the in-between with what might actually happen. I'm not ready to head for the hills, but I think it's going to get a little bit crazy. Tara says, totally a plan, years in the making. Glenn Beck did a special last night about it. You know, Tara, I had no idea. I'll have to go back and see if I can see that. I was out running around last night and did not see. Well, I don't watch TV anyway, but I do like Glenn Beck. Good morning, Sherry and Tara. Against Israel as well. Yeah, we're going to talk about Israel and their role in this entire situation also, with these escalating tensions that are taking place. But first, I'm just going to touch on some little tidbits of some things that to talk about, and then we're going to get to the really important stuff. And today's a really important day. We have not only facing threats from Iran, Al Qaeda, people in our own country, Mexico. I mean, seriously, who is outside of Israel? Who's on our side? Israel seems to be taking up for us. That's about it. I don't know if anyone else is, but that's a really big deal today. So, one of the things I wanted to talk about outside of all this craziness, I'm not a big fan of Josh Hawley. I've made that very clear my entire time that I've either worked in radio or in this podcast. Just not a big fan of Josh Hawley. And, every once in a while, I think I'm warming up to him and then I backtrack. I'm like, nah, nope, I'm not going to warm up to him. But, something that we've talked about many times, on various shows I've been on in here is these different genetic services like GED Match or 23andMe, Ancestry.com, where you're sending in your genetic material, they're analyzing it, they're creating a database with your genetics. And now, of course, we know 23andMe is for sale. I've heard that BlackRock is buying it. I've heard that Eric Prince was behind, the sale, of course, from Blackwater. Is that where he's from? And which is a completely different entity. And I've heard a lot of different stories of who might be trying to buy 23andMe and whose hands it will officially end up in. And, to me, it comes back and plays out a scenario that many of us have thought about and talked about before, where we're in this scenario where not only is AI and these deep fakes able to show you potentially committing a crime, it is insane how realistic some of these AI videos are. I know some of us have seen those videos where your hands are all messed up and you have three heads. It's not all like that. If you get some really good high-tech AI, it actually looks like the real thing. It really does, especially some of these deep fake videos. And then we have the facial recognition software that could easily be manipulated. And now we have to worry about our genetic material out there for the world to potentially take over. Now, what if all of this technology gets in the wrong hands? I don't know of any specific movie that this has happened in. Hollywood needs some new ideas. Maybe this is one of your new ideas, Hollywood, is that what if we had it reminds me of one of those movies where we have somebody being accused of a crime they didn't commit, and they have their DNA at the scene, they have their fingerprints at the scene, they have their they were caught on facial recognition, and then you see a video of them committing this act at the scene. All of that can be faked right now. If you become a big enough target of the wrong people, there's a lot of things that can happen to you, and we don't want that missing piece of the puzzle, which is your DNA, to be part of that system. Now, maybe I'm going to go in a little bit further than that. And Paul says all of that DNA data was sold long ago. Yeah, to some degree, a lot of it has. And we've been very vulnerable. I've never sent my DNA into any of these labs, but it doesn't matter. I don't have to. I could have some cousin that I've never even met before, never even heard of, that sends in their DNA. And guess what? It builds that family tree that somehow connects me in. Now, I have mixed thoughts on this because the family trees that they're making with your DNA, it's good for solving crime. I remember when those first cases, came about, I haven't had time lately, but I wrote a crime blog for many years. Some of you know, some of you don't know. And it was one of the things I talked about there on whatever show I was on at the time. And I remember when those first cases came out where all of a sudden we have hurting with CC Moore with Parabon Nanolabs. And she was the first person out there connecting and making these families trees based on either a suspect's DNA or a crime victim's DNA. And if you remember, what was the name of that guy that was in California? Was it the East Side Rapist? I believe was his name, was one of the first people that they caught D'Angelo or something was his last name. And it's been very pivotal. I remember the first time that it came out with Paramount Nanolabs where they say, we're working on our first 100 cold cases. We're going to break this DNA down, suspect DNA. We're going to build this family tree. We're going to identify, and they would, man, they'd work their way down that family tree and they'd get their guy. Now, since then, thousands of cases have been solved through genetic and familial DNA searches. And I think it's absolutely fantastic technology for the right reasons. But then we have to worry about the wrong reasons. And Josh Hawley, I've got a little video of him talking about it. Hopefully, my video showed up. I've been having some issues today, so who knows? Paul says if you've donated blood, then they have your DNA information. They've been gathering it illegally for decades, even though they said that our information was safe. Yeah, I've never donated blood. Trust me, they don't want my blood. Sherry says they did a Law and Order SVU episode on the. Oh, did they really, Sherry? Man, see, way ahead of me, way ahead of me. Genevieve, the deep fakes make me think of the movie Minority Report. Thank you, Genevieve. I was trying to think of that movie. I remember who's in it, but I couldn't quite place the name of it. And I think you guys know I work in the film industry. I see pretty much every single movie there is. There's very few that get past me, and they really need some new content. So I do hope that this would be a great storyline for sure. Well, here's Josh Hawley talking to 23andMe about the fact that 23andMe is saying, oh, before this sale is final, they're like, oh, well, we delete your genetic information. Josh Hawley's like, nope, that's not what it says over here. And you could tell this guy's lying. You can tell this guy's lying. Take a look at this.
And how long does that take?
Our policies state that, we will delete their data within 30 days. And in most cases, it is automatic and happens much quickly.
And when you delete it, it's deleted. It's gone forever.
All the genetic data is deleted forever, and yes.
Really? Because that's not what your privacy statement says in the fine print. Let's read it. What your statement says is, we retain personal information for as long as necessary to provide the services and fill the transactions you have requested, to comply with our legal obligations, resolve disputes, enforce agreements, et cetera, et cetera. And then it goes on, 23andMe and or our contracted genotyping laboratory will retain your genetic information even if you choose to delete your account.
Senator, 23andMe, it does not retain any genetic information regarding the consumer once they delete their account. We do.
It says right here that you will retain genetic information, including date of birth and sex, even if you choose to delete your account. This is your privacy policy. I'm just quoting from it.
Senator, to the best of my knowledge, we do not maintain any genetic information.
It says even if you choose to delete your account, we will retain your genetic information, date of birth and sex, even if you choose to delete your account.
There is some information that we do retain, but not related to the genetic information.
Right.
But that, such as name, email address,
and
other.
So even if you delete the account, you retain their name, you retain their email address, you retain their date of birth, you retain their sex, and you retain their genetic information, even if they choose to delete your account. So in other words, don't talk to your suit behind you, talk to me.
As much as I'm not the biggest fan of Josh Hawley, I do love that. I think that's pretty funny. Now, if you know about 23andMe, they filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy. They were tentatively bought by Regeneron for $256 million. But some folks out there in Congress are trying to do everything they can to stop that sale because we do not want that genetic material to end up in the wrong hands. Because as much as 23andMe wants to say that they have not saved your genetics, your genetic data, it appears that they actually have. And I think it was pretty clear to me that this guy's lying. He knows they have your genetic material. Why else would Regeneron want to buy it? If they didn't save your DNA, why does Regeneron want to buy it, 23andMe, for $256 million? Why? Because they're getting all that genetic information. And of course, they're going to use it for testing new drugs and other different things. But then what happens when they start selling it? Which is exactly what they're going to do. They don't need all that genetic material. They're going to keep a little for themselves, and then they're going to start selling it to the highest bidder. And it's really pretty scary to me. And then we have all of these other companies, just like 23andMe. I mean, your DNA is out there. It's almost to the point now where it doesn't matter whether you've submitted it, whether you're not. Like I said, doesn't matter. Some distant relative you've never heard of, never knew of, has submitted their DNA, and now all of a sudden you are in the database. There's absolutely nothing we can do to prevent it. And it's really kind of scary to me because I feel like there's really nothing we have left to of ourselves except for our DNA. That's pretty much it. They have everything else. If you have a driver's license or a state ID, then you are in the facial recognition system because every time you go to the DMV office and you stand there and they take your photo for your driver's license or for your state ID, that information is automatically uploaded into the facial recognition system. There's not anything you can do about it. You cannot opt out of it. It is just the way that it works. And I don't think it's right. I think there should be a way you can opt out, but you cannot. So they already have your face. That's why they're able so well to identify all these January 6th folks. But these rioters in, Los Angeles, Seattle, Chicago, Dallas, or New York City, they're everywhere right now. Do they try to identify them with facial recognition? No. Nope. Nope. They sure don't. Now, maybe that will change under Donald Trump. And Paula, good morning. Good to see you. Good morning, Joe. Hopefully, you guys are all having a good morning. The DNA thing is a big deal to me. It's been a big deal to me from day one. I don't like it at all, outside of it serving a purpose when it comes to crimes. And what's so funny about that is I feel like people are 50-50. Some people like it for your genetic DNA. Some people like it for the fact that it serves law enforcement. I like it that it serves law enforcement, not myself. But so many people do not want law enforcement to use genetic DNA to create these genetic trees to catch criminals, which is insane to me. Just think about all of the crimes that have been committed, all of the DNA that has been left behind. If they could fast track it through these different services, and it's not expensive, it's about $3,000 for Parabon Nanolabs to run this familial DNA search. So it's not terribly expensive for law enforcement to use it, which is why we are using it so much more. So I hope we continue in that aspect. But now some of these companies like Regeneron, they are not going to cooperate with police investigations. We still have GED match. They're limited these days. So it's so crazy to think that we have this capability, but we don't really have any way to use it because these companies block it. Because God knows here in the United States, the last thing we want to do is solve crimes, right? Or catch criminals or put people in jail. It's like, how do we get to this point where that's the absolute last thing we want? It's crazy, so crazy to me. I don't understand it. I just don't understand it. I I got a lot to talk about when it comes to protesting. I keep coming across my little notes. A couple other things I want to talk about: Doge cuts. Elon Musk backtracking. Man, I have a feeling. This is just my own personal thoughts. I know you guys probably disagree and have your own thoughts. I feel like Elon Musk is probably having some very lonely nights right now. And I love Elon Musk. I'm not talking bad about him at all. I think he's a fantastic patriot. And I hate to see the dissolution of his relationship with Donald Trump and the White House. But based on some of the ex, posts he's been making lately, I really do think that he's in a lot of retrospect, looking back and thinking like, what have I done? And, he, like all of us, we're all vulnerable sometimes. We all do things we wish we didn't do or say things we wish we didn't say. He on a much larger and grander scale, of course. But regardless of what you think of Elon Musk or what you think of his relationship with Donald Trump and the White House, he was very much responsible for these Doge cuts. And the Doge cuts have seen their first, one batch of Doge cuts have seen their first round going through the House. Here's what's interesting is that it's about $9.4 billion on the line in Doge cuts. That saves our country a lot of money when you're at the deficit that we're in. Of course, this big, beautiful bill is going to eat away at everything we've saved here, unfortunately. However, which is probably why Elon's mad, mad to begin with. Okay, we saved all this money in the budget, but then we go over here and overdo it on this side, and then all of our work has been for nothing. But $9.4 billion. And Paula says Elon did apologize and he removed post from X. Yes, he did. And he has been posting pretty much daily. And I think you can kind of hear the retrospect in his posts. I think he's really regretting, some of the choices that he made. And he made a post, I didn't save it, but he made a post over X. I guess it must have been last night. He does a lot of late night posting, which Donald Trump does as well, late night posting. And it was a video of Elon back when he was working, when we were doing America PAC, and he was trying to get out the early vote, talking about, hey, if anyone says anything bad about Donald Trump, guess what? You can just go back and look at Donald Trump's videos because they're all here on X. You can go back and you can see his words for yourself. I feel like that's kind of an apology to Donald Trump. And he has said that he regrets his posts and he wishes he didn't say what he did, that he took it too far. And then he even said that his own worst critic is himself. He has harmed himself, more than anyone else could. So I think that's a lot coming from Elon Musk. Let's see here. I will say that I hear more stories of finding family members that no one knew about, including my own family, because of genetic testing and matches. Well, I would love to hear more about that. I think that's fascinating. And I think there's so much good that comes out of the genetic DNA and the family, the familial DNA searches. I think there's far more good than bad, but there's that little iota of me that really worries it's going to get into the wrong hand. And then over time, maybe not even in our lifetimes, how will they use it against us? But they'll find other ways to get our DNA. So in the end, doesn't really matter. And Musk realized that being the richest man in the world doesn't change the government bureaucracy in Washington. He's frustrated beyond belief. I would have to 100% agree with you there. Is he wants it to happen today, just like the rest of us do. Where's the Epstein files? I want to know today. Let's cut this funding to XXX organizations. Let's do it right now. It doesn't work that way. Let's go out and take these protesters off the streets permanently. Let's give them 20 years each, 40 years each, like they were doing to the J6ers. It just doesn't work that way. And it is so frustrating. The difference is between us being frustrated and Elon Musk, we don't have the voice he does. We don't have the followers he does. So when he speaks, it's very loud and there's a huge overture compared to what we say. But I think we all feel that frustration. It's just, I can sit here and speak out and only you guys hear me. Elon Musk speaks out and the entire world hears him. And I think that's the big difference there, right? He's a human. He has emotions. He has frustrations. They just play out on a much larger scale. And Paul says Musk apparently also called President Trump to apologize. I'm sure he did, but I don't expect them ever. Trump may have forgave him, Sherry says, but I don't know that we'll ever see those two buddy again. I mean, that they were very close there for a while, and I loved it. Remember when Elon Musk said that he loved Donald Trump as much as any straight man can love another man, which I really thought was funny. And Sherry, I'm trying to trust the plan. I am. I do. But at the same time, there are things that worry me, like that situation that's going on with Rand Paul right now. It worries me. Dottie, at the beginning of the Doge discoveries, talk of $5,000 refunds to taxpayers. They should have never even suggested it. Well, where that came from, Dottie, is the government didn't suggest it. It was a guy, he was a broker of some type. He put a post out on X directed at Elon Musk that said, hey, we're saving the government all this money. Let's hand it back to the taxpayers. And Donald Trump and Elon Musk, being buddies at the time, said, you know what? Maybe we'll consider it. That's not a bad idea. And this guy, whoever he was, I don't remember his name, I talked about it at the time, but this was all his big plan. And then everybody just kind of took it and ran with it. Now, it doesn't mean that we won't get money back from the Doge cuts, but the Doge cuts haven't happened yet. They've got to run through all that red tape. So yes, we've laid off these people. We've given government workers, these early retirement, severance packages, et cetera, to save some money. We've done that. But the Doge cuts have not really come into technical effect yet. They just went through their first round of the House, $9.4 billion, and it did pass the first go through of the House. And a lot of people talked about what was interesting. I don't know if this is or is not interesting that Thomas Massey voted against the Doge cuts. He does not want the Doge cuts, which was really surprising, I think, to a lot of people that he took that stance. I'm not overly surprised, but I think it caught a lot of people off guard. And we'll have to see how all that goes. Now, somewhere down the way, once those Doge cuts are passed, and once we actually see that money back in the system, I guess you would call it, then maybe we'll get something out of it then. But I thought it was wrong, as this guy suggested, to only give it to taxpayers, because I think if we're going to give a credit, it needs to go to all Americans. And I know you're going to say, why does it go to all Americans? Because they're not paying. But a lot of programs were cut that would help out some Americans who really need it under Biden's term, like the elderly, children. There's a lot of people out there who don't pay taxes because they're in vulnerable positions. They're not all just deadbeats who don't want to work and don't pay taxes. There's a lot of vulnerable people out there as well. So I think the if there is a refund, it needs to go to every American, and I think everybody needs a little helping hand once in a while. American, not illegals, Americans. We'll backtrack on that one, right? Just Americans. And let's see here. Hi, Bobby. Good to see you this morning. Paula, Thomas Massey needs to go, in my opinion. He seems to be a troublemaker. Who could be against Doge cuts? Who could be against Doge cuts? This is just the first round of Doge cuts. Because we know, what was it, like 270 something billion dollars they ended up saving? Probably a lot more than that. They said really in the trillions. Excuse me. So we'll see how all that works out. But this is the first round. Let's see where it goes. And then we'll have to go with the subsequent rounds. Paula says, of course, he is not the only one that needs to go. You know what, Paula? I agree. They all need to go, in my opinion. They absolutely all need to go. I am tired of them all. Because you know what? I can't think of anyone in Congress who really stands up for us. I used to really like the Freedom Caucus, and I still do, but where are they? All of a sudden, Marjorie Taylor Greene, I haven't heard a peep out of her. Where is she at? Is she upset because, McCarthy's gone? I think they might have had a little thing going on. I don't know. Where is everyone? I don't understand where everybody's gone. Why is no one talking? I don't understand it. Jay says, you're still paying taxes, even if you are not paying income tax. And I agree, Jay, you're right. That's a great point to make, because every time you buy something, guess what? You're still paying taxes, and high taxes at that. Good morning, Scott. One of the people who I do like is Rand Paul. I've always liked him, whether you agree or don't agree. I would love to hear your side of the story, but he is no longer invited to the White House picnic, and he is not in the least bit happy about it. And what's interesting is, if you live in the St. Louis area, you know what Napoli is. And I was at Napoli one night and I met this just random guy. I can't remember now how I met him. We were talking about politics, and he's like, "Oh, I'm Rand Paul's son." And I remember, that's crazy. I didn't believe him, or really no, but he looked exactly like him, but he was wearing this suit. It kind of reminded me like a pimp suit. I remember thinking, what a strange thing to wear, but he's, who knows where he's from. Matt, good morning. And Paul says, Freedom Caucus has too much to lose. That is why they're mostly quiet. They are very quiet. They are very quiet. And we need people right now to stand up for us. Stand up for us. And they're not doing that right now, which is really disappointing. And Paul says, a lot of people are angry about the governor. I know I am. Yeah, Paula, right now I'm pretty much angry at every governor. I don't know what one you're talking about, except for Desantis. Right now, he's about the only one I liked. And as far as Missouri, I'm not a fan of Governor Kehoe. Just not a fan of him at all. There are some that I really do like. I like DeSantis. I didn't like him when he was running against Donald Trump, but I like him as the governor of Florida. And then I love Greg Abbott of Texas. He's right on. He's already got the National Guard up and ready, to protect their federal buildings during these impending protests. They already have protests, of course, going on across Texas. And I loved Governor Parson. I know a lot of people didn't. I liked him. I'm not going to get into JB Pritzker. We're not even going to talk about him. I'll have to leave the show if we start that. They'll come to my house and arrest me. We're going to talk about Desantis here in just a minute, but I wanted to play this video of Rand Paul because there's going to be times when I disagree with things that Donald Trump does. I love President Trump. You guys all know that. I talked about it, a lot, but every once in a while he does something that I don't agree with. And I'm sure that's the case for you guys too. And I don't agree with this stance on Rand Paul. And I think Rand Paul has been a good American. I think he has stood up for us at times when no one else would. I've liked a lot of his ideas. There's been some I haven't liked. But here's a little clip of him talking about how he was uninvited to the White House picnic. And I actually feel sorry for him. I think he really wanted to go. And I guess his son really wanted to go as well. Let's take a look at this.
My office, and it's kind of a great time of the year in the summer. My family comes up. My son and daughter-in-law and grandson are coming up because we were going to the White House picnic, but I've just been told that I've been uninvited from the picnic. I think I'm the first senator in the history of the United States to be uninvited to the White House picnic. The White House is owned by the taxpayers. We all are members of it. Every Democrat will be invited. Every Republican will be invited, but I will be the only one disallowed to come on the grounds of the White House. I just find this incredibly petty. I mean, I have been, I think, nothing but polite to the president. I have been a intellectual opponent, a public policy opponent, and he's chosen now to uninvite me from the picnic and to say my grandson can't come to the picnic. I just the level of immaturity is beyond words. I've been here long enough that if anybody has ever followed me, I've been a critic of Obama, I've been a critic of Biden, I've been a critic of the previous Trump, but always in I think, a reasonable fashion along policy. And so they've decided they want to declare war on my family and exclude us from the White House. And I just think it's incredibly petty. And I hope someone will ask them some questions about how they've decided to sink to this step.
What was the explanation given to you?
No explanation. We're just not welcome. But you have to get a ticket, and we've always gotten tickets. I mean, I've been to 10 White House picnics. There's like Easter egg rolls, there's picnics. This is for Congress. And I think what's particularly galling about it is, I don't know if this came from the president on down, let's hope not, but if not, it's coming from his petty staffers who have been running a sort of a paid influencer campaign against me for 2 weeks on Twitter. If you look at my Twitter, it's just gobs and gobs of these people. We know they're being paid.
So I don't know what happened. There's two sides to every story. Two sides to every story. It may have absolutely nothing to do with Donald Trump. It may be the staffers. Maybe Rand Paul did something to where he shouldn't be invited. I don't know. I've always liked the guy, quite honestly, and I don't like everything he does. And I wish that they would call him, and maybe Donald Trump will, and say, hey, you're invited to the picnic. What are you thinking? Or maybe he did something really dumb and he shouldn't be at the picnic. I don't know. Paul says, if this is true, then it's very petty on the administration's part. Paul says, Rand Paul is a jerk. I don't feel sorry for him. I used to be a fan. Lately, I'm not. Paul, I can't recall what it was, but he said something not too long ago that I didn't like. It was against Donald Trump, and I'm guessing that's where the uninvite came from to the picnic, but this is politics. If he's a member of Congress, he's involved. He should be allowed to go to the White House picnic. If you're the owner of a company, there might be employees you don't like, but they all still are invited to the White House picnic. Now, maybe you don't go over and talk to them or associate with them. Maybe they'll be the outcast at the picnic, but you still invite them. That's just the proper thing to do. So who knows? We'll see how this folds out. We'll see if Donald Trump has a comment. That was a really long video, by the way, 7 minutes. So I just played a couple seconds of it, but he goes on and on about pretty much the same stuff. Apparently he's very upset about not going to this White House picnic. And I get it. And Paul says, Paul was physically assaulted and hurt really bad by his neighbor for siding with Trump in his first administration. I remember that. He has stood up for Trump. Paula says, I don't think this is coming from Trump. He wouldn't do that. I agree, Paula. I don't think Donald Trump would do that either. And so I really do think that he'll probably hear that Rand Paul has been speaking out and probably give him a call or reach out to him. We'll know, won't we? Because we'll find out about this White House picnic and whether or not Rand Paul was able to attend the White House picnic or whether he was cast aside, continuously. We'll find out. Paula says, I think he will be invited eventually. I think you're probably right, Paula. They will probably rescind that uninvite and let him go. But I hope that it's not the staffers, doing something like this without Trump's approval. Poor little Rand Paul. But Donald Trump's pretty darn happy, I bet you, today, because remember how he wants to take over Greenland? Well, he's got the go ahead from the Danish lawmakers. Guess what? We're going to be building an Air Force base on Danish soil. Who would have ever thought it was possible? One step closer to annexing Greenland. I'm kind of excited about it. And I don't think that Trump is going to let it go. I don't think he's going to let it go. I don't think we're going to get Canada. I don't see that happening. We'd be in an all-out war if we even tried. But Greenland is a whole nother story. I think Greenland is within reach. I really do. So we'll see how that works out. Good morning, Cindy. So good to see you this morning. Glutzna, I saw you popping through. And Linda says, Rand Paul has been one of my favorites. He was one of my favorites too. But, I don't care who they are. If they're a member of Congress, I mostly just don't like them. That's Republicans, Democrats. I mostly just don't like them because all I can think about in my head is that none of these people are standing up for us. They're just not. And a lot of them, I don't think, are happy about Doge cuts. Why? Because most of them were getting kickbacks, from different bills that we passed. And I would love to know if there's one member of Congress who did not get a kickback. And I think that's why they're all so quiet, because they know they're just as guilty as the Democrats. I can't, and that stupid Lindsey Graham, I'm not going to talk about him. I will lose my mind today if I even think about Lindsey Graham. But I don't trust any of them. Jay says, I don't trust him. Speaking of Rand Paul, Paul says, wow, I had not heard that about Greenland. It is some good news. We need an Air Force base on Danish soil. So that's going to happen. And I think Donald Trump, we're going to talk about these threats here in just a second, that not only are we facing as Americans, but that Donald Trump's, I've got like a little wispy hair that keeps poking me in the eye, which happens pretty much every day, but today worse than usual. We're facing a lot of threats right now, a lot of threats. There's a lot going on. I started out the show talking about how I think it's a coordinated plan. I said the other day that I do think that all of these protests are a coup that's been planned and staged long before Donald Trump was elected. They just had to wait for the right time to get things going. So I think that's what this is all about. And now we have foreign, entities getting in the mix of things. And it's pretty crazy because there's this is kind of like a two-parter. We have Iran threatening the United States, threatening to strike our Air Force bases. Now we have Israel. Now here's a side that I didn't really hear till Colonel Joe Adams sent me this text. I knew about Iran threatening the United States and our Air Force bases. I saw the evacuations that were taking place yesterday. I'm sure you did too, away from Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates, families and non-essential personnel being evacuated out of our American Air Force bases in a lot of different regions across the Middle East. And I thought, well, that's probably because of Iran, and it's probably because of Al Qaeda making a very serious threat against Americans and Donald Trump and JD Vance, which I will explain a little bit further. And then I heard from Colonel Joe Adams, and I think, okay, there's an article out there from Zero Hedge, and I believe a lot of what Zero Hedge says, maybe not everything, but most of it. And they were talking about how Israel is planning to strike Iran, because Iran, of course, is really talking up and trying to work out these nuclear deals. So did we evacuate our bases because Israel is getting ready to strike Iran? Or is it because Iran has directly threatened us? Or is it because Al Qaeda is directly threatening us? We're kind of like its little pinpoint in the entire world is pointing at us, calling us the bad guys and wanting to harm us. So it's really hard to say right now who is our biggest enemy, because they're pretty much all standing up against us. Good morning, Larry. This weekend's parade in DC is a cover. Look for Israel to hit Iran by Saturday. You just might be right, Larry. There's a lot of folks who believe it's happening. Paula, I am the same I don't trust any of Congress. I don't. And it's also hard to trust the news. I try to get a lot of my news from back channels or, people in the know. And it's hard to, I don't watch the news at all. I read the news. I do not watch the television news at all. And I've watched a little bit more, with all of this coverage, but it's been more people live who have live webcams, out on the streets. But we're facing some serious challenges right now. I'm going to show you a post that Iran made onto their X account. And now, as you guys know, if you watch this show, my system is not very friendly towards photos, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull it up or not. What's so funny about it, though, is when I first came on the show today, it was there, and here we go, and I don't see it now. So I will have to show you guys later. Isn't that crazy? It was just here when I first started the show. It was there, and now all of a sudden it's gone. I'm going to look up here, but I don't think it's there. Nope, just me up there. Anyway, it's so frustrating to me. I think I'm going to have to change my podcasting system because it will not allow me to show photos, and it drives me absolutely insane. I had the photo. Either way, you can look later. Iran posted their own little X and post. It's so weird still not to say tweet. Tweet seems so much better. But they posted their little X on there, and it says we are ready. It had the Iranian flag, and it said we are ready. That's on the official Iranian X channel. Yes, Iran has an X channel. And so they posted, we are ready along with their flag. And I'm thinking, they're ready for what? Are they ready because Israel's going to strike them? So they're ready? Are they ready because they are planning to harm Americans? What's the deal? So Iran made a direct threat to the United States, to our Air Force bases, and said, if the talks it's a two-parter. They said if the talks break down over nuclear weapons, they want a nuclear weapon. If the talks break down, then they're going to strike our Air Force bases. Or if they're directly involved in conflict, which I'm assuming they're talking about Israel, they're going to strike our Air Force bases. So it sounds like there's a good likelihood they could strike our Air Force bases. However, Iran, and I've talked about Iran for years, Iran does a lot of talking. They're like that little dog that barks, 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 but never bites. And now, yes, they have proxies, but so do we. I'm not condemning Iran because they have proxies. The United States has proxies too. So does the UK. So does every country. We all have our little proxies that go out and fight our little wars for us. So I can't condemn Iran for that. But I know that they make a lot of threats. And it's been always my understanding, the way that I've always viewed things, is that unless Iran is directly attacked, that they will not act out. They respond in a retaliatory fashion. They usually don't make the first strike. But could they potentially see the breakdown in nuclear talks as being, a direct threat to them, to where they feel like they have to strike out? They've threatened us so many times, and they've never done a darn thing. So we'll see what happens. And Jay says Iran absolutely won't make a nuclear deal, and they cannot be allowed to have nuclear weapons. Agreed, Jay. We cannot allow that to happen. Paul says it's the Dems' plan B, C, and D. It's only just begun. The left knows it worked for the first time. In their minds, they think any opposition to protest will look unfavorably on Trump. They obviously underestimated how the American public is done with the manufactured protests. You got that right. Paul says if they hit our bases, then it's scorched earth time in Iran. It might be scorched earth time for Iran either way. Larry says Iran has tested a missile with a 2,000-pound warhead. Yeah, I have mixed thoughts on Iran. Like I just said, I don't want them to have a nuclear weapon. I don't want to put them in that type of position of power, because even if they didn't use it, they'd hold it over our heads constantly. And we cannot allow that to happen. We know that they're deeply entrenched with the Muslim Brotherhood. Here we go. How is it all connected? Deeply entrenched with the Muslim Brotherhood. And we also know now we have Al Qaeda, jumping in the mix. So we've got Iran, we've got Al Qaeda, all wanting to harm Americans, and Donald Trump and JD Vance. And so Iran, we'll see how that situation plays out. We'll see if it's true, if Israel really does strike Iran, and if they do, to what type of capacity. Then we'll have to see what Iran does, because I'll tell you what, Iran has a lot of sleeper cells in this country. I can guarantee you, whatever big city is near you and those surrounding communities, there are Iranian sleeper cells in those areas. And they are waiting, just like the jihadis, they're waiting for that call to get out there and do their part to harm Americans. And I feel like we're facing just a lot of threats from a lot of different angles right now. So we'll see what happens with Iran, if we don't strike Iran, if we don't lash out against them, I don't expect them to do anything. They've threatened our Air Force bases so many times, so many times. We'll see how that all plays out. But in the meantime, I think a much realer threat, much more concerning threat is going to be coming from the jihadists. Because I'll tell you what, did that video not load too? I'm having all kinds of problems today. I don't need I don't need to play the video to show it, but we'll see. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see if this is it. I can't really. No, that's not it. I don't know what is going on with my system here. I have got to switch because half the videos I loaded this morning I don't think are here, which is just really weird. And I named them all, so I don't think this is it. But let me see. I don't
ثم
think this
إننا ندعو ومن الآن كإجراء عملي أول.
So I'm going to backtrack this. I'm going to turn the sound off and I'm just going to read it to you because I know there's a lot of people who message me and they say, you know, I'm listening to the show. I can't read those subtitles. So I'm going to mute that. I'm just going to read these subtitles to you. Hopefully you can hear me. This is a real threat. This is the leader of Al-Qaeda. And this guy means business. And I don't trust Al-Qaeda one single bit. His name is al-Awlaki. And he is calling for Muslims to wage war on the United States, as well as to unalive President Trump and JD Vance. So we're going to see what he has to say here.
ثم إننا ندعو ومن الآن كإجراء عملي أولي كل مسلم على أرض أمريكا الكافرة المجرمة المتغطرسة سواء أكان من أصول عربية أم أمريكية أو غيرها. المهم أن يكون دينه الإسلام ونبيه محمدا عليه الصلاة والسلام. والذين بلغ تعدادهم 4.5 مليون مسلما في أمريكا وحدها. نقول لهم جميعا الثأر الثأر لا تشاوروا أحدا في قتل الأمريكان الكفرة ولتكن همتكم كبيرة وقائمة استهدافاتكم مؤثرة فدونكم عتاة الأرض وأكابر مجرميها فهذا ترامب ونائبه وهذا مستشاره وداعمه ماليا وإداريا وتقنيا إيلون ماسك وهذان وزيرا خارجيته ودفاعه وأهلوهم أجمعين وكل من يمت لساسة البيت الأبيض بصلة أو قرابة.
And see, when something like this happens, there are people out there who are just crazy enough. Oh, it is. Oh, Dottie, I am so sorry. The video's not muted and I'm just talking over him. Thank you for that, Dottie. See, I don't know these things unless somebody tells me. I can't hear the video, so I always assume if I can't hear it, you guys can't hear it either. Oh, well, you get the idea of what he's trying to say. He wants to harm, unalive Donald Trump, unalive JD Vance, Elon Musk, you know, all of these different folks that are part of the United States government, as well as us. And you know good and well that there are some lunatics out there who are going to see and hear this message and they think this is their call to duty, their call, you know, to meet their Allah, their call to go up to find their 72 virgins and they're going to act upon it and they're going to be martyrs. And it's a very serious threat. I certainly take it very seriously, very seriously. And Paul says, once the U.S. retaliates against Iran, all of his sleeper cells will be activated in the U.S. Our government and general public have a sleep at the wheel in regards to how vulnerable we are. We truly are. And you know, the biggest part with this is that look what's going on across our country right now. We are in a very weak and vulnerable place, all by design. All of this is by design. You know, we have 250 NGOs, Chrissy Walton of Walmart, of all beings. Whoever thought Walmart would like become a terrorist organization? And then we have, you know, the Communist Party. We have the Muslim Brotherhood, all coming against Americans in the coming days. They are all coming out against us. Why? Because Donald Trump took money away from them. He cut the funding to all these groups. Think about that. He cut the funding to these NGOs. He cut the funding to the Muslim Brotherhood. He cut the funding to a lot of these different Islamic groups. And they are certainly not happy about it. And where Walmart comes into play is all of these tariffs against China. You walk into a Walmart store, and guess what? Every single thing there is imported from somewhere. It's all made in China or India. Even their produce and food items, a lot of their food items are coming in from different countries. And so these tariffs hit Walmart really hard. We all know what Walmart does. They employ people. Most of the people who work at Walmart live in poverty. Isn't that crazy? They don't pay them enough. They don't pay them a livable wage. They don't provide benefits to most of their employees because most of their employees are not full-time employees. They do that on purpose, of course. And so this hurts their bottom dollar. Of course, they're angry, at Donald Trump. And don't think this wasn't planned. Long before Donald Trump won this election, they all got together and said, guess what? If Donald Trump wins, we're going to stage a coup. We're going to make sure he gets impeached. We're going to criminalize him in any way we possibly can. We're going to bait him as much as we can to falling for our little ploys. And then we're going to make sure he's out of office and that he and his kind never come back. Then we had Doge Department come through and wipe out the funding for these NGOs. Well, then now they joined the group. So now we have all of these folks against us, all of them against us. A lot of people in the tech industry, the CCP, all of these groups. It's so crazy to think that all of these groups have come together at the same time against us. Now we have to worry about sleeper cells, coming out. Are they going to be at the protests? I've shown you guys videos this week of people at these protests who look like jihadists to me. They're yelling out a la Bakar, whatever it is they say. And it's pretty crazy. And I really do worry about what's going to happen and what it's all going to lead to. And Sherry says, Walmart has gotten billions a year from SNAP. Yeah, and that's about to change in some areas when they're talking about certain types of foods are not going to be able to be used by SNAP services, SNAP, a food stamp type program, where they're going to potentially outlaw you using your food stamp SNAP benefits to purchase sugary foods like sodas or like potato chips, junk food, that type of thing. You'll have to purchase whole foods or healthy things. I don't know if that'll ever pass, but if it did, that's going to really hurt Walmart. And I think Walmart feels very, very threatened by everything that Donald Trump is doing because we're all about made in America. Walmart would not be what it is right now if we actually bought products made in America, because they don't sell anything there that's made in America that I'm aware of. I mean, maybe a couple little things, but it would really hurt them as a company. And quite honestly, people go there to buy cheap products. American made products are not cheap products. You pay more, but you're getting a better quality and you're supporting your own country. The last thing Walmart wants to do is support their own country. That is the absolute last thing they want to do. So of course they're going to come out against Donald Trump. And then we have, these protests just growing. I mean, it's crazy. They are just growing out of control. Paula says, Walmart has also run mom and pop stores out of business. Yes. I live in an area, again, a rural area, 7,000 people live here. And I've heard the stories. Of course, I've only lived here recently. I don't know about the history too much, but I've heard from people talking about they really fought Walmart coming into town. One of the people I do know in this town is very involved in politics, and he's been here his entire life. His family, owns a lot of businesses here, the mom and pop type businesses, and they fought their hardest to keep Walmart out. And he actually had some land. I can't recall if it was his or land he managed. I think it was his land. And he told me a story about how this guy kind of came out of nowhere. And I think it was Stan Kroenke back at the time, believe it or not, worked real estate deals for Walmart. And he said they walked into his office and he said, hey, I've got a client. I'm not going to tell you who it is, but they want to buy your land. And this guy I know, he's like, nope. Whoever it is, or no, I think he told me. I think he said he told the guy to write down the 3 different names on a piece of paper of stores or businesses, clients that could possibly be. And when he looked at the 3 names this guy wrote down, one of them was Walmart. And he's like, no, I am not selling you this land. You're not building a Walmart in this community. And of course, then they ended up finding land in another area and somebody did sell it to them. And when they did, a lot of local businesses closed down. And you see Walmarts in all parts of rural areas. And that's exactly what they've done. They've put a lot of people out of business. Well, I'm running out of time, so I can't keep talking about Walmart as much as I would like to. Paula says Walmart has, we talked about that. Jay says, Sam Walton was very much pro-American. Yes, he was. And then his daughter just ran his reputation into the ground, didn't she? Just terrible, terrible, terrible. So we've got these protests taking place. I'm not going to talk too long about it because we're all very aware of the protests that are going on. But one of the things I did want to talk about, especially if you're here in the St. Louis area, but just because this is in St. Louis doesn't mean it's not going to happen in other areas too. But I do think St. Louis is going to face potentially more violence than some of the other protest areas because we're involved in a lot of different ways. And they call it an emergency protest. Have you guys heard about this? From LA to St. Louis, it's called Ice Out. Now, this is going to be happening. It started yesterday. This was from the Tam Avenue overpass. Now, I did drive through there last night, but it wasn't until after. So this was yesterday, and it's supposed to run through Saturday. But here's what's interesting about this. It's not even that particular protest because the protest they had yesterday, nothing happened. But something that I thought was interesting is what they're warning protesters. It says, all things escalate, remember. If you aren't prepared to be arrested, stay home. If your body can't handle pepper spray and rubber bullets, stay home. If you can't self-evacuate, stay home. Showing up to protests unprepared put yourself and others in danger. Other ways to show up says bring water to the protest. Let's see here. Babysit. Give rides. Help bail people out. Bail people out from what? There is no bail anymore. Push the message on social media and many, many more. I mean, these people, to me, this is terrorist. When you're organizing something that you know is going to become violent, that you want to become violent, that's a terrorist activity. When are we going to start calling these people terrorists? Now, of course, Desantis, who is my favorite person in Florida, as always, he has now given Floridians the permission to run these folks over. And I'm going to play this little video clip for you. It's very short, but it's pretty darn funny.
And we also have a policy that if you're driving on one of those streets and a mob, and we also have a policy that if you're driving on one of those streets and a mob comes and surrounds your vehicle and threatens you, you have a right to flee for your safety. And so if you drive off and you hit one of these people, that's their fault for impinging on you. You don't have to sit there and just be a sitting duck and let the mob grab you out of your car and drag you through the streets. You have a right to defend yourself in Florida.
And I think you should have the right to defend yourself in any state, don't you? If you're in a situation where there are violent protesters around you, let's say shooting off fireworks at your car or beating on your windows or your doors or trying to shoot at or fire upon police and your car is right there and they have you blocked in, you absolutely should be able to save your life. That's called self-defense. We live in America. We should be able to be allowed to protect ourselves and our families. I wish that we had a Desantis in every single state. I wasn't a big fan of Desantis running against Donald Trump, but as the governor of Florida, I love it. And I wish every other governor would follow suit. And we'll see what happens. Tammy said she loves him. Me too, Tammy. Paula says, when will Antifa be designated a terror organization? They absolutely should be. And I kind of thought that that's something that Trump was working to do. So we'll see how far that goes. Jay says, Illinois does not have a stand your ground law. Isn't that the truth, Jay? Which is ridiculous. And Tammy, carry wasp spray. That's a good idea, or bear spray. Paul said, but that's what protesters want. It's a great video for midterms. True. But you know what? We outnumber the protesters and we outnumber the Democrats for that matter as well. And speaking of these protests, I wanted to show you, this is one of probably the more volatile scenes I've seen during the protests. And at the beginning of the show, by the way, I'm not going to play it again, but at the beginning of the show, I played a video that was released by the White House about these protests, and it showed some of the violent aspects that took place. But this here happened in Seattle. We know that the protests in Seattle do have that tendency to become very violent. So I want you to take a look at this quick here, because this is, fireworks can be deadly, quite honestly. And here we have protesters firing fireworks at police. That's really difficult to see. It's hard for me to watch that. I know so many police officers, and it's really difficult to watch that, because not only is it a physical threat, man, pray for all of the officers. If there's anything you do today, say a prayer for our law enforcement, because in our National Guard, our Marines, anyone who's out involved in these protests, because I'll tell you what, we think about the physical aspect that these police officers are being assaulted. And as you could see in that one, it looked like they had a pretty good pepper sprayer there themselves, which was really nice to see. But think about the emotional toll, the PTSD that these officers have to deal with after these types of situations, to where here you are trying to protect your community, and then you have these people who savagely hate you. They'll do anything they can to harm you, and you really just don't know which one has a firework, which one has a real gun, and guess what? Which one has an IED? Because they found an IED at a protest the other day. And I believe that was in Chicago, if I have that right. I believe it was Chicago. And with the growing threat from Islamic extremists, I think we can expect to see IEDs at these various protests. We just don't know anymore what these protesters have, what's behind their motive. We just don't know. And I'll tell you what, I do. I pray for these law enforcement officers to have to be out there and face these threats mentally, physically. And I think it's going to get a lot worse this weekend. 1,500 protests planned over 50 states. And how violent are they going to become? And, 1,500 cities, that's a lot. That's a lot of places. I don't know where all of those are. But let's see, Paul says, and that's, folks, how you keep law and order. It's called consequences for your action, or better stated, Vevo. Yes, you are correct. Paula, yes, praying for officers, military, first responders, and ICE. We're going to talk about ICE real quick before I have to make a run for it. And Lori says, makes me so incredibly sad. What person would want to be a police officer anymore? God bless them. Man, Lori, that's so true. That is so true. They're putting their lives on the line every single day, for us Americans, every single day. That's the life they live. And yes, they often are threatened, more some areas, more than others. But, any traffic stop a police officer has, it doesn't matter if you work in the safest city in town. You have no idea who you're pulling over, what they've just done, what they're capable of doing. You really just had never have any idea. But you know what? They get up, they go to work every day, they go out to these calls every day, and they risk their lives every day. And I can't imagine how many of them are going to be so emotionally scarred from some of this fighting, especially when you see young people. Most of these people have children, grandchildren, and here you have these young people out at these protests and, firebombing police, throwing Molotov cocktails at police, these mostly peaceful protests, right? I just watched a video yesterday of a guy who threw a Molotov cocktail at police. It's just really unbelievable. But you know what? ICE isn't backing down. They are not backing down. And I think ICE knows, I think we all know, this is really not about ICE. It's not about deportations, not about any of that stuff. This is a staged coup against Donald Trump. That's all this is. They want his term to be tarnished. They want George Floyd style riots to take place across this country. They're going to be burning businesses. They're going to be looting businesses. They're going to be trying their best to harm police officers. And I just finally heard, I hadn't heard a report yet of innocent civilians being harmed. Now I'm starting to hear that's happening. And I'm hearing some warnings from some, people who I think are in the know, who said, hey, people, be prepared, Americans. You don't have to be at one of these protests to face violence. You don't have to be there. They're going to be coming into your community. Potentially, they're going to be out looking for people like you, and you need to be prepared for that. I'm not sure how far I want to go in telling people they need to be prepared, for violent protests. Do you or don't you? I personally think you should always be prepared no matter what's going on. So if you're like me and you think you should always be prepared, it doesn't really matter too much. But if you're not prepared, do you need to be prepared? Paul, mostly paid protests, 100% so. And that's the whole problem, is when you have these paid protests, then you don't know how far people are willing to go. If they're getting paid to create violence, you just don't know how far. I was on the highway last night and I was driving and I was seeing buses and groups of people who I could tell were together. And I'm thinking, are they for us or against us? Are they heading to a protest somewhere? Are they here to fight for us or against us? And I kind of feel that when you're out on the streets right now and you look at the vehicles around you, you do have to wonder, are they for us or are they against us? Are these people on their way to a protest? Are they going to be burning businesses down later or carrying their American flags? We really just don't know. But my best advice to you, if you don't have to, no, don't go around these protests. It's just not worth it. But in the meantime, of course, ICE, they're not worried. ICE is stepping up. They're going to these sanctuary cities. Matter of fact, they're heading out to Seattle, Chicago, Philadelphia, New York, Northern Virginia. And what they're doing, and it is true, they are doing it, they're going out to these protests and they're picking out people who are not here illegally as people are being detained. A lot of these people are not here illegally, and they're picking them up and they're deporting them. They deport people so fast anymore that by the time that the protest is over, by the end of the night, these people are already gone. I was shocked at how fast I heard they can. It's within 24 hours they're now deporting people. It is fast. They pick you up, boy, you're on your way out real quick. And then we have the Hells Angels getting involved. Gosh, it's already 11 minutes after. I only got a couple seconds here. And Paul says there's more protests scheduled in St. Louis than you're hearing. Pay attention to the intersection of Big Bend and Manchester. Is that where Ann Wagner's office is? I know here in the St. Louis area, they plan to protest at Ann Wagner's office. And I kind of laughed, and I posted this on Facebook because I'm like, of all the folks they could protest, all the Republicans, why Ann Wagner? I don't even consider her to be a Republican. She's not a Donald Trump supporter. I mean, why are they protesting her? And I'm like, maybe we should join forces with them because we could all go out and protest her at the same time. How about that? We'll just join forces and all go after Ann Wagner, not physically or harmfully, of course, but peacefully protesting in front of her office. I don't get the why they're after Ann Wagner. If I were a violent Antifa type protester, Ann Wagner's house is not the one, or office is not the one I would choose. But there's going to be another protest at Baptist Road in Limburg. There's going to be one at Keener Plaza, the Tam Avenue overpass. They're going to be spread out all across St. Louis and St. Louis County. They're going to be in Illinois. I've heard Edwardsville. There's a couple other cities I've heard in the Metro East. So, wherever you live, trust me, there's going to be plenty of protests for you to talk about this coming Saturday. But now we've got Hell's Angels in the mix, which I thought was kind of funny. And again, me and my videos today, I know I have a video of the Hells Angels, but will I be able to play it or will I not? And I'm guessing that I cannot because I don't see it. I don't know what is happening, but I'm going to do some work on my system here so that I can. I don't think this is it, but I'm going to take a look real quick. What is? Kind of a good way to end the show, isn't it? Not only some good music, but some Hells Angels. Now, what kind of havoc are they going to wreak? Now, I will tell you that they are on our side. Strangely enough, the Hells Angels are on our side. Motorcycle clubs heading out to all these big cities. I haven't heard yet about St. Louis. They're in Texas right now. They're rolling into Los Angeles from the video we just saw. And they're going to do their best because I'll tell you what, I don't know where Hells Angels vote. I don't know if they do vote. I don't know if I'm assuming they're Donald Trump supporters. It's strange because, these motorcycle clubs used to be so against police officers, and some of them still are, but they're going to come out and they're going to fight for their country. A lot of Hells Angels, a lot of these motorcycle clubs are veterans. They are veterans. A lot of them, older ones were from the Vietnam area, newer ones from the Gulf War and so on. So don't think that these people aren't going to come out and fight in our name. Paul says, please stay out of the way of the Marines. You got that right. And show the gremlins. And Paul, yes, she's only out for her own interest. All right, guys, it is 14 after. I have to work today, so I'm going to leave it at that. We'll have so much more to talk about tomorrow. And as the days progress, tomorrow being Friday, of course, I'm so happy for Friday. Tomorrow I keep saying we're going to talk about gardening. I know some of you don't even care about gardening and some of you do, but we're going to talk about it tomorrow because I've got some issues I'm dealing with in my garden. I really want to talk about. And Friday is the perfect time to do that. But we're going to be talking tomorrow about preparation and some of the things you can do just in case you end up stuck in one of these protests, how can you protect yourself? And should you be prepared at home? We're going to be talking about these things tomorrow. We're going to see where the situation with Iran goes. Does it escalate? We're going to talk a little bit more about Al Qaeda and if it is a true threat, if we're going to see these threats carried out. So lots and lots to talk about tomorrow. And by the way, Paul, I know you mentioned stay out of the way of the Marines. It was confirmed yesterday the National Guard has not detained one single person. All the claims against National Guard completely false, as we've talked about every day this week. They are there to protect federal buildings and nothing more. And I've heard firsthand accounts of people saying the National Guard, they're standing, they're not even allowed to go on the sidewalk. They're protecting these federal buildings. If you go up, you can stand 2 inches from them and they will not touch you. Now, if the police are there, the police could potentially detain you. National Guard, not going to do it unless you attack one of them. And I thought that was pretty interesting. Yes, have a good weekend. Paul, you're not going to be with us tomorrow. Well, have a good weekend if you're not, but I will see you all tomorrow. I'm Tabitha Hassell with Tabs on Tap, and I hope you guys have a fantastic day.